So it looks like our numbers are quickly moving, and so we're going to go ahead and get started. I'm Zelda Boyd, and I want to welcome you on behalf of the National Center for Early Childhood Quality Assurance. And I want to thank you for joining the session this evening. I know that for many of you, this is the beginning of the evening and a long day with children and families. And so we thank you for joining the Business for Family Childcare, Money Management, Retirement. So before we get into the content today, I'm going to turn it over to Sarah so that she can tell us a bit about the interpretation feature.
Thank you so much, Zelda. Hi, everyone. My name is Sarah Koyak, and I am also with the National Center on Early Childhood Quality Assurance. If we could go to the next slide, please. We do have the Zoom interpretation feature enabled today. And so within the Zoom platform, you should see a small globe icon that says interpretation. And if you click that, you can select your preferred language, English or Spanish. And we do ask that you select a language, English or Spanish, for the webinar today, just so you can hear us or you can hear our interpreters. And we are joined this evening by our two interpreters, Juanita and Camila, and they're waving hello. And I will now pass it over to Zelda to get us started. And Zelda, it looks like you're still on mute.
I'm sorry. We want to spend the most of our time today hearing from Tom. So welcome back, Tom Copeland. We all know and appreciate his work and wisdom with family child care. So Tom, I'm going to turn it over to you so we can maximize our time with you this evening.
Thank you very much. Good evening, everybody. Welcome. I'm Tom Copeland, coming to you from my home office in St. Paul, Minnesota, where it is finally getting warmer. We're going to be talking about one of my favorite topics as I get very close to retiring myself: money management and retirement. I want to say right off the bat that most of what I'm going to say is my opinion about things. So if you don't agree with some of the things I'm saying, that's okay. We're going to cover a lot of different topics. We're going to look at how to better manage your money, how to increase your savings, learn the difference between acceptable and unacceptable debt. We'll look at the various types of IRA plans that you could invest in, and we'll say some things about Social Security and setting financial goals. I'm an attorney who has worked on the business side of family childcare for 4 decades, trying to help family childcare providers be more successful as a business. I've done that through writing of books, traveling around the country, answering questions. If you have questions after listening to this, I'm happy to try to answer them. Here is my email address, tomcopeland@live.com. I don't charge anything for answering your questions. Your questions might be about the topic of money management and retirement, or about any other issue related to the business side of family childcare. Your question might be answered on my website, tomcopelandblog.com, where I've posted hundreds of articles on all aspects of the business side of family childcare, including a section just devoted to money management and retirement. Every time I post something on my website, it will appear on my Facebook page. So you can follow me on Facebook and ask me questions on Facebook. I've written a book, Family Childcare, Money Management, and Retirement Guide. For this class, if you have questions, please post them under chat. I'll be looking at those questions. I'll be pausing several times during this session where I'll be trying to answer your questions. If I can't get to answering all of your questions, I will be posting the questions and answers on my website. This webinar is being recorded. And within a couple weeks after tonight, I will be posting a link to the recording along with the questions and answers that I receive during the course of this webinar. So don't hesitate to post your questions under chat. I'm not providing you with individual professional advice. I'm not your financial planner. So if you need professional advice, you need to seek it out. Let's start by talking about money. In the course of researching the book I wrote, I did a survey and received responses from over 500 family childcare providers from around the country. Most providers were not doing well financially. Very few had saved money in an emergency fund. Many had thousands of dollars of credit card debt. Very few were saving enough for their retirement. Now, some providers do well financially. I'm not saying that every provider is hurting financially, but many providers, like many non-providers, are not where they want to be financially. When I first started working on the book, I thought, well, most providers aren't making a lot of money. So maybe the first chapter should be about how to increase your income. But I quickly realized that that was not a good idea. When we first graduated from high school, and then perhaps graduated from college, over time, our income probably went up. But during the same time, our expenses probably went up. So even though maybe we were somewhat better off financially, just increasing our income did not necessarily mean we had more in savings or that we were saving more for retirement. So therefore, I concluded that the first chapter in my book should be more about spending and getting spending under control. Because without getting spending under control, our tendency when we get more income is to spend it. So I would recommend, if you haven't already done this, to do this exercise. Track where all the money in your family goes for at least a month. And put the money under two columns. Fixed expenses. Those expenses that you really don't have any control over each month. And those expenses could include the mortgage payment or rent, property tax, gas, different types of insurance. Maybe you're making a payment on a car loan, payment on credit cards, utilities, could be some other expenses. The second category would be flexible expenses. Those expenses you have some control over. Food, clothing, gas, taking a vacation, entertainment, cable television, charitable contributions, hobbies. Everybody's lists are going to be a little bit different than other folks. One provider said on her flexible expense column, she had shoes. For me, I would have books. I like to spend money on books. So we want to list those expenses. For most people, when the month begins, we start spending money, fixed expenses, flexible expenses, and at the end of the month, if there's any money left over, we call that savings. But for many people, there's very little, if anything, left over, and therefore, most people aren't saving very much. If we were in a room together and I asked you, how many people here are comfortable? How comfortable are you? Sorry, how comfortable are you with your current financial situation? And your choices were, I'm very comfortable. I'm somewhat comfortable. I'm not comfortable. Most providers, in my experience, would say they're either only somewhat comfortable, and many would say not at all comfortable. Then I would ask, how comfortable are you that you're saving enough for your retirement? Very comfortable, somewhat comfortable, not comfortable. Most providers would say they're not comfortable. And why is this? In part, in my opinion, because I believe that most people place savings as the lowest of priorities. And because of that, there's usually not much that providers are saving. So once you've listed your expenses, the next step in the exercise is to set a modest savings goal, an amount that you would set aside each month for saving. And we want it to be small enough that you're not going to have any trouble putting that money aside each month. $50 a month, $100 a month, I don't know, something. And make that a fixed expense at the top of the column of fixed expenses, which means on the first of every month, you put that money aside. $20, $50, $100. And if you start running out of money before the end of the month, you have to cut something under the flexible column. It's up to you what you want to cut. You're not cutting savings. If it's me, I'm not cutting books. I'll cut clothing. I'll cut food. I'm not cutting my books. It's up to you. What's the next thing we want to do with this exercise? You want to look at the fixed column and say to yourself, which of these expenses could I get more control over more easily than some of the other items? And in my opinion, that would be car loan interest and credit card interest. Paying interest makes it more difficult to save for retirement. And as I'll say a little bit later, car loan interest and credit card interest are things that you should not have. You should be paying cash for your car. You should be paying your credit cards off in full each month. That may not be possible now, but that's a goal, in my opinion, that you should work towards so that we don't have car loan payments or credit card payments on that fixed side. Lastly, we want to look at this list and say to yourself, does this money that I'm spending accurately reflect what's important in my life? Does it reflect your values? Because how you spend your money does say something about what you think is important in your life. And if there are important things in your life that require money that are not on your spending list, then you need to make an adjustment. What would you change about your spending to put it more in line with your values? Here's what I mean. Years ago, my wife and I lived in a 6-bedroom, 100-year-old Victorian house. It was just my wife and I and 2 cats. We bought the house years before that. It was very cheap, but we kept spending money to fix it up because it was 100 years old. I was on the road doing a training and reading a book called Your Money or Your Life. It's a great book, Your Money or Your Life. It talks about how we spend our time, how we earn our money, and what's important. And as I was reading this book, I realized that the way my wife and I were spending our money and time was fixing up our house. And up until then, I felt like that was what I wanted to do. That was most important. But as I was reading the book, I realized that I had changed my mind. That now I would rather spend more time and money taking a vacation, retiring earlier. So it occurred to me that we should sell our house and buy a much smaller house that costs less money and would not require a lot of upkeep. So I came home and I said to my wife, we should sell our house because this is not where we want to continue to spend our money. And she said, we should sell our house because we don't need 6 bedrooms. So we downsized to a 1950s Rambler, 1-story, 3 bedrooms, lower property tax, lower utility bills. That made sense. What's important in our life can certainly change over time. And when it does, I think we should pay attention to that and where our money is going, so that we're trying to align our values with our money. And is the way you're spending the money now really reflective of what's important? Because if you're not saving for your retirement, that says to me, you don't value retirement very much. You're just planning to continue to work forever. And if you say, well, no, Tom, I do value retirement, then you need to show me where you're putting your money that reflects that. What I've been saying is usually not in sync with what our society tells us. I'm saying save money. Our culture says spend money. When is the last time you saw an ad on television that said, thinking about spending some money today? Don't do it. This message brought to you by, well, who's going to put an ad on television telling us not to spend money? Many providers spend money on the children in their care to express their love. You love the children. And I've talked to providers who say every week they buy a little something for the children, a treat or a little toy or a little something, because they want to give that to the children to show the children that they love them. in my opinion, that's a bad idea. You can show your love to children in many ways, obviously. You give them a hug in the morning. You tell them that you love them. You don't need to spend money to show your love. Some providers spend money to excess. One provider said to me, I bought all kinds of things. My house was full of things. I went to the store one day to buy something, and I came home and I realized I had already bought it before. I had so much stuff in my house, I didn't realize what I had. And she was just spending, and not paying attention to what she had. We don't want to try to spend money to meet an emotional need. When you give something to the children, you're going to feel good, but that feeling lasts for a very short period of time. You cannot meet an emotional need around love or any other emotional need by spending money. You can always start saving with a small amount of money. You don't need to have a lot of money to start saving. If you saved $5 a day for 5 days a week, you'd have $1,250 at the end of the year with no interest. For 10 years, if this money earned 8% a year, you'd have $19,000. Don't worry that you don't have a lot of money to save. The sooner you start saving a little bit, the less you're going to have to save. When I asked providers in my survey how they saved money, this is what some of them said. One provider said she asked the parents in her program to bring some business supplies that she could use: crayons, scissors, construction paper, and so on. And that helped keep the provider's spending down. One provider said she had always thrown a fancy birthday party for the children in her care, but she realized it cost her a lot of money. So she finally decided to tell parents, here's a list of things that I need for the next birthday party. And every parent needs to bring one of these things for the party: the cake, the decorations, the beverages, and so on. She said all of the parents were willing to bring something on this list because they knew that their child was going to get a nice birthday as well. And as a result, this provider never spent any more money on birthday parties. Another provider said, if I get a windfall, I save it, I don't spend it. A windfall is money that you get throughout the year that you didn't plan on. You didn't know you were going to get it at the beginning of the year. Now, this could be a tax refund. It could be some cash you got as a birthday party gift, coupons, rebates. Save it. You didn't need it because you weren't planning on it. There are websites that give a lot of different household tips for how to save money: The Frugal Shopper, Simple Living. All right. I'm not saying that you can never buy flowers, you can never go to the movies, you can never eat out. No. I'm not saying go to the extreme. I am saying that for most providers, they don't need to spend as much as they are spending. And I'm trying to encourage you not to spend as much. One provider said, and I really like this, she wrote to me, when I go out looking to buy something for my business, before I'll buy it, I'll ask myself this question: will it improve my business or entice parents to my program, or will it not matter? So if it's not going to matter, she won't spend the money. It's a little way for her to control her urge to spend. One of the things I do is when I need some cash and I go to my bank's ATM, I won't take out more than $40 unless I'm traveling. Why? I don't want more than $40 in my wallet, because the more money I have in my wallet, the more I'm likely to spend. So when I start spending down that $40 and I get near the end, I'll say, well, I'm sorry, I can't buy something else because I don't have enough in my wallet. I'll need to go back to the bank. And I'm not planning to do that for a few more days. It's just a little trick that I'm sure lots of people have to try to keep their spending under control. Let me pause, see if there's some questions, and I'm happy to try to answer them right now.
Great. So Tom, there are a few questions around an IRA. So we have a question about how much should I be putting in my IRA each month?
Let's hold questions about IRAs till later. I'm going to be talking a whole section about that.
Great. So then we have another question, which is a good question. Should you save if you have debt?
If it's, I'm going to mention this a little bit later, but I'll answer it now. Not a simple question. If we're talking about retirement savings and credit card debt, in my opinion, you should do a little of each. Pay a little bit down on the credit card and save for retirement, because the sooner you save for retirement, the more tax benefit you're going to get. You don't want to put all your money into retirement and not pay down credit cards because of the high interest rates of credit cards. You don't want to pay off all your credit cards because you'll lose some of that big tax advantage of retirement savings. So it depends on the debt. I would not pay down the house mortgage unless you're already saving enough for retirement, you have an emergency fund, you don't have credit card debt, you're paying cash for your car. If you don't have any debts and you're saving, then okay, start paying down your house.
Great. And Tom, I think the other question is really related to an IRA, and you may be planning to answer this question later, but what type of retirement accounts should a sole proprietor own?
I'll talk about that later.
Okay, great. So then I think we can move on and answer your questions later.
Great. So now we've been talking about savings. So I want to talk first about short-term savings goals and what we can do. And then we'll talk about long-term saving goals, such as retirement. When you're saving some money, you need to decide what you're saving it for. It's not a good idea, in my opinion, to save some money and put it somewhere without a plan for what it's for. Because without a plan, you're more likely to spend it on something else. So now we're talking about short term. Let's say you need the money within the next 1 to 5 years. That's a short-term goal. What might you want to be saving money for? It could be to set up an emergency fund. buy a car, make a down payment on a house, make a home improvement. All right? There could be other things that you want the money for within the next 1 to 5 years. So you want to put that money in a place that's going to preserve the money so that it's going to be there when you need it. It needs to be readily accessible. You want to be able to get it right away. And as a result, you want to look for a place where it's going to be low risk. You don't want the money to go down in value when you need it. And as a result, you're not going to earn much interest. It's going to be low return. So here are 4 possibilities. You could put it in a bank savings account. Now, it's earning less than 0.5%, very low interest. But that's okay. There's no risk because the money in your bank is insured. There's no penalty for taking it out as soon as you need it. If you want to earn a little more interest than what your local bank can offer, you can go online and put money in a bank savings account through a place called ING Direct. That's a place to look for a little higher rate of return. The second option is a money market fund. Again, the interest you're going to earn on this is very low, less than 1%. Very low risk, no penalty for taking it out. It's not insured, but the risk is so low that I really wouldn't worry about it. Money market fund is a fund that's invested in government securities and bonds and very, very low risk places so that you don't have to worry that it's going to lose money. The third option is a certificate of deposit, a CD. You can buy a CD for a certain period of time, 1 year, 3 years, 5 years, 10 years. A 5-year CD, maybe a little bit more than 1% right now. There's no risk because CDs are insured. You get a little bit higher return than the bank or the money market fund. However, in most cases, there's a penalty if you try to take it out earlier than, let's say, 5 years in this example. The fourth option is what's called a short-term bond fund. You can earn a higher rate of return than the other 3 options. It's still a low risk, relatively low risk. No penalty for taking it out earlier. It's not insured. Well, which of the 4 options makes sense? The money market fund and the short-term bond funds are more flexible, with a little higher rate of return. If you don't need the money for a year, you don't need it for a year or 2 years, then getting a CD or a short-term bond fund makes more sense because it'll generally give you a higher rate of return. But if you are saving money for an emergency fund, then you do not want it in a CD because of the early withdrawal penalty. Getting out of debt. My father always said to me that there's only 3 things that you should borrow money for: a house, a home improvement, and your education. Why? Because in general, those 3 items will increase in value over time. Your house is going to be worth more 5 years from now than it is today. A home improvement will increase the value of your home. Education over time has a financial payoff. In general, people with a higher level of education are earning more money. Everything else decreases in value. You buy a car, you drive it off the lot, you turn around, you go around the block and you come back and say, I want to sell the car back to you. You're going to get a lot less money for it. Because virtually everything else declines in value after you buy it, you should pay cash for it. That's what my father said. And he said, if you can't afford to pay cash for it, you can't afford it. And you need to save money until you can pay cash for it. That was his philosophy. And I think that makes a lot of sense. So that includes paying cash for a car. Now, the vast majority of people borrow money when buying a car. And cars now are a lot more expensive. So my suggestion is to start putting aside some money now for the next car you're going to buy. And that could be a separate savings plan. And maybe instead of putting down 10% or 20% down the next time you buy a car, you'd put down 30%. And then the next time, 40%. The long-term goal, in my opinion, should be increasing the amount you pay down so that eventually you get to 100%. My website, if you go to the handouts section of my website, has a handout called a car replacement fund, which will give you some tips on how to do it. Credit card debt. Not being able to pay off your credit cards in full at the end of each month is a sign of overspending. You're paying maybe 15, maybe 20% on credit card interest. That makes it very difficult to save. If you look at how much credit card interest you paid last year, that money could have been set aside as savings. Having unpaid credit card balances means it will hurt your credit rating. It will mean that you'll pay higher interest rates when borrowing money for a car or getting a mortgage or getting a home equity loan. You're going to pay higher interest rates on other debt. If you had a $5,000 balance and you're paying 18% interest and made only the $100 minimum monthly payment, it would take you 30 years to pay it off. And you would pay over $17,500 on that $5,000 balance. What do? Try not to go into further debt with your credit cards. Try to throw away your retail store credit cards. People will spend more money with a store credit card than if you didn't have that store credit card. You could call up your credit card company and ask them to reduce your interest rate. That often works. You could shop around online for a better interest rate from credit cards through creditcards.com and bankrate.com. Debit cards can be useful because they act like checks. The problem is to watch out that you don't want to get overdraft fees. If you can keep your spending under control and not have to pay those fees, then debit cards make a lot of sense. If you are having bigger issues with debt, you could go to this website, debtreductionservices.org, which has a lot of helpful information. You could prioritize debt. There's no right or wrong. If you have credit card debt, student loans, car loans, mortgage, you could pay off the highest interest rate debt first, which would be credit cards. Or you could pay off the debt that has the smallest amount. Maybe your, I don't know, student loans are the smallest amount, and maybe then you can pay that off faster, which gives you an incentive to go after the next debt. As I said before, you want to pay off credit cards before trying to pay off your mortgage. There are credit counseling services that you can access through United Way that can help you negotiate and work down your debt. So now let's shift and talk about saving for retirement. First, I want to say again, you can start small. Let's say we have twins, Faye and Fred. Faye starts saving for her retirement at age 35. She puts aside $2,000 a year for 10 years, for a total of $20,000. Let's say she earns 8% a year. I'm not telling you that you can always count on earning 8% a year when saving for retirement. Last year, if you had money in the stock market, it earned 10, 15%. This year so far, you'd lose money. So over a long period of time, 8% is just an example. So Faye would have $135,000 after 30 years. Fred, her twin, waits until he's age 45 to start saving money. He puts aside $2,000 a year for 20 years, or $40,000. He earns 8% a year. When he, I should say, after 30 years, he'll have, I'm sorry, I take that back. After 20 years, he's now 65. Faye is 65. He's only going to have $91,000. He saved twice as much as Faye, but he has a third less because he waited. He waited 10 years. Therefore, when is the best day for you to start saving for your retirement? It's today. When is the next best day? It's tomorrow. We don't care about anything else. We don't care about what the stock market is going to do, or the elections, or taxes, or anything. The sooner you save money, the less you'll need to save for your retirement. Again, I asked providers, what did they do about helping them save for retirement? One provider said, I save something each month. I try to develop the savings habit. And that's what I tried to say in our first exercise of putting aside a little bit of savings at the beginning of each month. That's another way of saying that you're paying yourself first. Another provider said, at the beginning of every year, I would look at the kids in my care and I would pick one of the children and say, that's my retirement baby. All the money I get from this child is going into my retirement. I love that. Another provider said, I put aside my food program check and save that for retirement. Another provider said, half of my food program check. Another provider said, to make it easier for me to save, I had money directly taken out of my checking account every month into a retirement account, direct deposit, so that I didn't have to think about it every time. Another provider said, anytime I got some extra money, I put it aside in my retirement. That could have been registration fees, late pickup fees, field trip fees, supply fees. You're giving me a headache fee. She put it into her retirement. Even though I've said, well, saving every month is a good idea, the sooner in the year, the earlier in the year that you save, the better. So if you can, you want to put more money aside for retirement January, February, March than October, November, December. Because the earlier you save, even if it's earlier in the year, the more you're going to have in your retirement. So try, if you can, to put more money aside earlier in the year. How much are you going to need in retirement? Most experts say you'll need about 70 to 80% of what your current income is to maintain the same standard of living when you retire. Women in general will need to save more than men because women will live longer than men. My mother died last year at 96. My father died at 85. Women also tend to earn less over their lifetime, and therefore their Social Security benefit is generally going to be lower. Women who live longer tend to have more medical expenses than men, and that's another reason women need to save more. To get an idea of how much you need to save, I would suggest looking at some retirement calculators. And here are some examples. They will tell you to plug in your age, how much you've saved so far, when you plan to retire, when do you plan to claim Social Security, a number of questions. And then it will say, well, and then how much do you want to have each year in retirement? And you can say, well, I want 70% of what I'm making now. I want 80%, whatever. And when you plug that information in, it will tell you how much you need to save each month now to reach that goal. Now, I need to caution you that most people, when they use these calculators and they get the answer of how much they need to save now, are shocked. Oh no, $1,000 a month, whatever. Oh, I can't possibly do that. So don't let that shake you, because you can go back into the calculator and make some adjustments. Well, maybe I'll retire a year later. Maybe I'll claim Social Security a little later. Maybe I'll earn a little bit more. I'll earn a little bit in retirement. You can adjust things. How do most people make it? You're going to live in retirement on the money that you have in retirement. So I'm trying to encourage you to save more so that your standard of living in retirement will be a little bit higher. What do most people do? They work longer than they had planned. That's why we see people of an age that we can see that they're eligible for Social Security saying to us, welcome to Walmart, or would you like more fries with that? They are on Social Security, but they're still working. And people then tend to live on less. Maybe you can't live on 80% or 70%. Now maybe you have to live on 65% of what you're making now. Most people did not receive a good education about saving and retirement from our parents. We didn't get it in high school. We didn't get it in college. So we're generally on our own. And right now, on average, we can expect to live about a fourth of our life in retirement. That's a long time. So we need to take some more responsibility for retirement planning. Couple of points. Don't take steps, don't invest your money in something you don't understand. If you didn't understand what I meant by a money market fund or a CD or a short-term bond fund, don't do it. Don't put money there until you understand what it means. And you can easily go on the internet and read up on what money market funds are. I would recommend as a starting point to learn more about money is the book Personal Finance for Dummies by Eric Tyson. It's one of those yellow dummy books. It's on Amazon. It's great. It's simple, but it's really good. You could take some financial planning classes. Last night, I went to our local library to hear someone talk about estate planning, planning for money to be distributed after you die. It was free. I went to it just to see what I could learn. And you might have the opportunity to hear about financial classes, money classes, Social Security classes. I would urge you to take them. You could join an investment club with other women. There are women's investment clubs, and help you educate yourself that way. And obviously, you can go on the internet. There are a lot of resources on the internet. Let me pause again for questions.
Okay, so Tom, you've answered quite a few of the questions. I do have a specific question here. If I have a licensed childcare business incorporated, do I automatically, or am I automatically contributing to my Social Security when I pay taxes? Or is there something separate that I need to do?
First, if you're incorporated, you're paying Social Security tax on the profit of your corporation. If you're self-employed, you're paying Social Security tax on the profit of your business. If you're self-employed, like most providers, you're sending in a form at the end of the year that tells Social Security how much you made, and it'll say how much Social Security tax that you owe. You never write a separate check to Social Security, whether you're incorporated or not. It's included in the taxes that you owe as an individual.
Great. And I believe you answered this question, but I'm going to ask it again. What is the maximum amount can I put away per year for my retirement?
It depends on the different retirement option, which I'll talk about in a minute.
Okay. And then the last question was, what would be the best way to invest in a 401k?
I'm going to talk about that in a second. So let's get to it. Everybody's anxious about these 401ks and retirement plans. So let's talk about it. What is an IRA? An individual retirement account. It's a tax benefit. Congress passed a law many years ago that gives a significant tax benefit if people invest their money into a fund and call it an IRA. And it allows you to defer paying taxes on it, with one exception, for many years until you're ready to take it out at retirement. You can invest this money in almost anything: stocks, bonds, real estate, gold. Once you pick a fund to put your money in, you label it that's my IRA. And when you call it your IRA, now you get this tax benefit of not having to pay taxes on what it's earning until you take it out at retirement. Here's how it works. You make a contribution. You get a tax deduction also at the time you make a contribution, with the exception of a Roth IRA. This investment earns interest, depending on what you invested in. At age 59 and a half, you can start taking the money out. And except for a Roth, you're going to pay tax on what you put in, and you're going to pay tax on the interest. But because you delayed paying tax on that interest, it's a significant tax benefit. How significant? Investing in an IRA is the biggest tax benefit you will get in your life. Let's say you invested $5,000 a year for 20 years. And let's just say it earned 8% a year. No guarantee, but in this example, you're earning 8% of the year. If you didn't label this fund as your IRA, that means you'd be paying tax on the interest every year. And in 20 years, you'd have $129,000. If you labeled it your IRA and got the tax benefit of that, you'd have $164,000. Plus the tax benefit of the tax deduction each year that you put that money aside. This is a significant difference. That means you want the vast majority of money that you're saving for retirement within an IRA. Here are the 4 IRA options for most child care providers. The regular IRA, also called the traditional IRA. You're eligible if you're married and your spouse has a retirement plan at work, if your adjusted gross income is about $129,000 or less. If you are single or your spouse does not have a retirement plan through work, then you're eligible if you're making less than $214,000 a year. You can contribute up to $6,000 a year into a regular IRA per person. You, your spouse, that's $12,000. If you're age 50 or older, you can contribute an extra $1,000. It's tax deductible when you put it aside, and you're going to pay taxes on it later. The second option is called the simple IRA. There's no income eligibility limits. Everyone can put money aside into a simple IRA. The maximum you can contribute is $13,500. Now, for any contribution to an IRA, it can't be more than your income, than your profit. So your profit has to be at least $13,500 to be able to contribute $13,500. If you are age 50 or older, you can contribute an additional $3,000. It's tax deductible when you put the money aside, and you're going to pay taxes on it later. Now, if you're self-employed and you have employees, depending on how long the person has worked for you and how much you pay them, you may have to set aside some money for their simple IRA if you're setting up a simple for yourself. The amount that you would have to set aside for your employee is going to be relatively small. The third type of IRA, a SEP IRA, a simplified employee pension. Again, no income eligibility limits. The maximum you can contribute is about 18.5% of your profit. It's tax deductible You pay taxes later. Now, I don't like the SEP very much because if you had a $10,000 profit, you could only set aside about $1,800. If you had a $20,000 profit, you could only set aside about $3,600. So both the regular IRA and the simple IRA, in almost every situation, allows you to set aside a lot more than the SEP. Again, with the SEP, if you have employees, you may have to set aside some money to their retirement. The last type of IRA is the Roth IRA. It's different. There is some income eligibility limits. If you're married and filing jointly, you have to be making less than $214,000. That means your profit plus your spouse's gross income has to be less than $214,000. If you're single, your profit has to be less than $144,000. If you are single and your profit last year was more than $144,000, send me an email. I want to write a story about you. How did you do it? A few years ago, I was in Brooklyn, New York, doing a training, and I just had described this, and we took a break, and the provider came up to me and said, I'm single, and I'm not eligible for a Roth IRA. Meaning she was making more than, at that time, about $140,000 a year. So it's possible. The maximum you can contribute to a Roth is $6,000 if you're per year. If you're age 50 or more, an extra $1,000. Now, for all of these options, you don't have to contribute the maximum. Each fund will allow you to contribute so much just to get started. And it could be 1,000, it could be 500. And you don't have to contribute the same amount every year or the maximum every year. You don't even have to contribute every year. Now, here's the big difference with the Roth IRA. It's not tax deductible. When you put money aside, it will not reduce your taxes for that year. It earns interest. When you take the money out after age 59 and a half, you won't pay tax on what you contributed because you already paid tax on that. And you will not pay tax on the interest you earn. And that's the big difference. Over time, you'll probably end up better off with a Roth IRA. Let me explain this in a different way. Have you heard of what's called the marshmallow study? If you haven't heard of that, go on the internet and Google marshmallow study. It was a study that started in the 1960s at Stanford or some other university, where they brought preschoolers into a room and sat them in front of a table and put a marshmallow in front of them. And they said, I'm going to leave the room. When I come back, if that marshmallow is still here, I'll give you another one. And they filmed it. Some of the kids ate the marshmallow immediately. Some of the kids sniffed it and licked it and put their head in their hand. And it's hilarious. The person left for about a minute. They started tracking these children. And after decades, what did they find? The children who did not eat the marshmallow were significantly better off financially. They were earning more money. They had more wealth. Why? Delayed gratification, self-control, are significant indicators of success in life. Therefore, in my opinion, providers who contribute to a Roth IRA are the kind of people who do not eat the marshmallow. They're willing to give up a benefit today by getting a bigger benefit later. When you retire and start claiming Social Security, you're going to pay tax on most of the Social Security benefits. If you take money out of any other IRA, you're going to pay tax on that. If you have a pension, you're going to pay tax on that. If you earn some money after you retire, part-time money, you're going to pay tax on that. And those taxes in retirement can be difficult to manage. If you have money in a Roth IRA, you can take that out without paying tax on it. And that can help keep your tax bracket lower. So I really like the Roth IRA. Now, I've given you 4 options. There are some other options, but I think these are the most important ones. What I haven't mentioned is a 401k plan that your spouse may have through work. So in my opinion, the first priority, financial priority, should be to maximize out the amount that your spouse can contribute to his or her 401k plan to get the maximum employer match. Those companies that are contributing something to their employees' retirement 401k, you want to make sure you're getting the most you can from the employer because it's free money. Next, once you've done that, in my opinion, you should then make the maximum contribution to a Roth IRA. And if you have more money that you want to put aside in retirement, then I would either contribute more to your 401k plan or set up a simple IRA. And those 2 choices depend on what kind of funds the company offers and how much the fees are in those funds. Savers credit. This is a tax credit for low income taxpayers, which could include many family childcare providers. It's a tax credit on top of the tax deduction of an IRA contribution. You're eligible for this credit for this year if you're married and filing jointly and your profit and your spouse's gross income is less than $68,000. If you're single, you're eligible if your profit is less than $34,000. You can contribute up to $2,000 into any IRA, any of the ones I've mentioned. And you'll get, depending on how low your income is, a 10%, 20%, or 50% tax credit. It's a double tax benefit. And if you contributed to an IRA in previous years and perhaps were income eligible, you can amend your tax return back 3 years and get a refund for this credit. Social Security. When you claim Social Security is one of the biggest financial decisions you can make in your life. You can start claiming Social Security at as early as age 62. Your full retirement age is either age 66 or 67. Now, because of the pandemic and financial difficulty that many providers are in, you may be tempted to claim your Social Security benefit before you reach your full retirement age. If you do that and you earn more than $19,560 this year, your benefit will be a little bit less. You can still work and claim Social Security before you reach your full retirement age, but your benefit's going to be a little bit less. When should you claim Social Security benefits? Ideally, you want to claim benefits as late as possible. The latest you can claim is age 70. Each year that you wait before claiming Social Security, your benefit will go up. And between your full retirement age and age 70, your benefit will go up by about 8% a year. That's a lot. So even though there's a incentive to keep waiting, there's a big incentive at the end. And that's why, if you can, you want to try to wait until age 70. Now, not everybody can. Maybe you have bad health, you have serious financial difficulties now. There are other reasons why you may want to claim it earlier. But you want to educate yourself about when is the best time to claim it by taking these two steps. First, go to the Social Security website, socialsecurity.gov, and look up your account or create one. And it'll show you your annual Social Security statement. On that statement, it will tell you how much you can expect to receive Social Security if you start taking it at age 62, your full retirement age, and age 70. So you'll see for yourself how much more you'll get if you wait. It will also show you how much you earned each year in your working life. Your Social Security benefit will be based on the highest 35 years of earnings over your lifetime. And your statement will say whether or not, will show you how much you can expect to get and whether you've first qualified for Social Security. To qualify for Social Security, you have to have worked for at least 10 years and paid into Social Security for 10 years. If you see that in 2006, there's 0 next to how much you earned, and you know you earned money that year, something was not properly reported to Social Security, and you need to contact them to find out what happened. You don't want to wait until you're ready to claim Social Security and find out that your benefits were not properly reported. Second, I strongly recommend you go to this next website called opensocialsecurity.com. It's an online free calculator that will tell you when to claim Social Security to maximize the amount of benefits that you will get from Social Security over your life. Now, this calculator, which I used a number of years ago, was a revelation to me and my wife. My wife is 4 years younger than me. Our plan was when I got to be age 70 and she would be age 66, that's when we would both start claiming Social Security. But I went to this calculator and it said, no, my wife should start claiming Social Security earlier than age 66. And at that time, I can start claiming a spousal benefit, meaning half of her benefit. I could get half of her benefit until I reached age 70, and then I could get my full benefit. I wouldn't lose anything at age 70, but I would get half of her benefit for those years. She would get a little bit less because she was claiming before 66, but that was more than offset by the extra money I was going to get. We had no idea. So I went to our financial planner and said, does this make sense? She said, yes. I went and talked to the Social Security office. I said, is this right? And they said, yes. And so that's what we did. And that's made a big difference. I can't tell you why I qualified for the spousal benefit. Social Security is complicated. So I strongly recommend that you do not claim Social Security benefits until you've used that calculator and talk to somebody either from Social Security or financial planner about your situation. Because waiting one more year to collect Social Security could make a big difference. And you want to educate yourself about this. Lastly, and then I'll take questions. Setting financial goals. It may seem simple, but it's true. People who set financial goals and write them down are much more likely to reach them than people who don't. So we're close to the middle of the year. Set some financial goals between now and the end of the year. What do you want to achieve financially? And brainstorm some things. And it might be to get this maximum employer match that I talked about. It might be to get adequate insurance, to get more liability insurance. Maybe it's to pay off some of your credit cards. Maybe you want to put money aside in an emergency fund. Maybe you want to start paying off the car faster, saving for the next car. Maybe you want to put some money aside for retirement. Maybe you want to save for your college education for your children. Your list could be very different. So you brainstorm. Then you pick one or two. What do we think we can do between now and the end of the year? Maybe you want to pay off half of your credit card debt and contribute 1 week of an emergency fund. Okay, you write it down. At the end of the year, you look back at what you wrote and say, how did we do? Well, maybe you paid off 40% of your credit card debt, not half of it. Maybe you did get 1 week of an emergency fund. Okay, you met some of the goal, not all of it. Okay, fine. Now set a goal for 2023. Setting a goal, measuring how well you did, setting another goal is going to get you where you want to go. People have plans, but if you don't write them down, you don't measure, it's going to be much harder to reach them. Now, I say this not to try to overwhelm you. You know, we all have debt. We all have financial problems. We're not where we want to be. Okay, but that's don't look back. Oh, the mistakes I made in the past. Oh, if I'd only started to save for my retirement years ago. Forget that. What are you going to do now? Set a goal. It can be a modest goal. Get in the habit of setting goals and saving money, making a little progress every year. This is a long-term thing. Don't let short-term spending make it more difficult to save. In my opinion, once you start saving, then it makes it easier to reduce your spending. In other words, if you're putting some money aside at the beginning of every month, or if you have a plan for saving so much money each year for retirement, then when you're tempted to buy something, you want to buy a new outdoor grill, think to yourself, well, if I buy this, will it reduce the chances of meeting my financial goals? And only if it won't reduce those chances can you afford it. That's the way to think about it. Your big goals should be ones you're working on slowly. Maybe it's going to take you 5 years to get the car funded, 5 years to pay off the credit card. Okay, you're on that plan. You're you're doing the steps you need to take each year. And once you're on that plan, now you can feel more comfortable spending money on other things because you're taking care of these goals. Lastly, hopefully we're out of the pandemic or almost out of the pandemic, but there can be financial crisis in the future. There have been in the past. So I would suggest, when you have the ability, to think about setting aside an emergency fund for the next financial crisis, a 3-month emergency fund, 3 months worth of your minimum house expenses, the minimum living expenses that you need, minimum. 3 months of that, set it aside. You're not going to be able to do it all at once. Start setting a little bit aside each month, every 6 months or so, to build up an emergency fund. Claim all the deductions you're entitled to claim as a child care provider. I've written a book that lists over 1,000 deductions. You want to keep your taxes lower, and with those lower taxes, put more money aside in that emergency fund. You may want to think about raising fees to earn a little bit of extra money, raising the or increasing or establishing a registration fee each year, supply fees, and so on. Reduce debt, reduce that car loan debt, reduce the credit card debt, reduce the student loan debt, because the next time there's a financial crisis, the less debt you have, the easier it will be to deal with it. I've just been talking about money, money, money. But obviously, your job is not all about money. It's about caring for children. And that's your top priority. And you all realize that the non-financial rewards of what you're doing were more important than the financial rewards. Some providers may never make a whole lot of money, but I still think there's always a little bit of room to save more. Some providers will do very well financially, but regardless of whether you're making a lot of money or not much money, success, happiness doesn't have a price tag. So I don't want to leave the impression that only by saving more money will make you happy. No. Here is my contact information again. Here's my phone number. Here's my email address. Here's my website and Facebook page. Questions?
Okay, so Tom, we had quite a few questions around the IRA in terms of, can you have more than one IRA account? And
let me answer that one first. Okay. You can have a regular IRA and a Roth at the same time, is in the same year, but the total amount you can contribute can't be more than $6,000 per person. You can have a regular IRA and a simple IRA, or a regular IRA and a SEP IRA, or a Roth IRA and a simple IRA, or a Roth IRA and a SEP IRA.
Great. And then the next question, kind of a follow on to that, can you transition from a simple or traditional IRA to a Roth?
You can roll over a regular IRA or simple IRA into a Roth, yes. But if you do that, you're going to have to pay tax on the interest that it's earned so far. If you can pay that interest out of your pocket and not reduce the amount that you're rolling over, then I think it's a good idea. Years ago, my wife quit a job and there was a pension there, and we rolled that over into a Roth IRA, and we paid the tax on that interest. So yes, you can do that.
Okay, and then there are so many. Another is that, have you heard of hiring your children and establishing a Roth IRA for your children?
Yes, if you're self-employed or even if you're a corporation, you can hire your children. There are rules about hiring your own children. They have to be doing work for your business. You have to keep proper records. If they're if they're age 18 or over, you have to withhold Social Security taxes. So there's some rules around that. However, once the child is earning some money, you can then put some of the money aside for their own Roth IRA. In other words, let's say the child earns $5,000 in the year. You can take money out of your pocket, not out of the $5,000 that the child got, but you can put $1,000, $2,000, $3,000, whatever, out of your pocket into the child's Roth IRA.
Okay, so let's move on a little bit to 401k. We have a question. I know there's oftentimes confusion around, being that subsidy payments are paid through the state, are we considered a state employee? And can we tap into the state 401k plan?
No. When you are getting caring for subsidized children, you're not considered state employees, and which allow you to get into the state 401k plan. No, unfortunately not. Now I say that not knowing the rules in every 50 states, but I've never heard of that being able to be done by a child care provider.
Great. So we'll ask just one more question and just remind everyone that we will make sure that Tom gets these questions, and then you can also reach him on his blog. But what do you think about life insurance? Is it an investment for future?
In my opinion, I'm not your financial planner. You should separate life insurance from retirement planning, retirement savings, and not buy them together. There's products out there that are life insurance and retirement. In my opinion, I don't like it because of the fees associated with it. Life insurance makes sense if someone is relying on your income after you die. In other words, if you die, someone is going to be in worse financial situation because they're counting on your income. If that could be your children, young children in particular, or a spouse, or a grandmother, or somebody else that you're taking care of. If that's the case, then purchasing life insurance makes sense. My wife and I, no kids. So it doesn't make sense. And both of us worked all our lives, so neither of us needs the other person's income. So we never needed life insurance. Retirement, invest for retirement separately outside of life insurance, my opinion.
Great. So Tom, we're at 9:31 Eastern time. And so we're going to go ahead and close out and have Sarah pull up our survey questions before everyone jumps off this evening.
Thank you, Zelda and Tom. I did just pull up the evaluation questions, so it should have popped up on everyone's Zoom screen. Please scroll down. There are 3 questions. The last one is for comments at the very bottom. So if you could just please remember to scroll down to find that question at the end. And I will leave this up for a few minutes and pass it back to Zelda to close out the call.
Great. And thank you all again for joining the call this evening. And just as a reminder that we just have 2 more sessions remaining, and then Tom will be retiring. And so many of you have already been saying, giving your thanks and appreciation for Tom, but continue to do that in the chat box. And as you fill out the evaluation poll, Patty wanted me to, Tom, pass on to you another one of Mark Twain's quotes. And this one is, work consists of whatever a body is obliged to do. Play consists of whatever a body is not obliged to do. So we hope that as you go into retirement that you play, and do anything that you're not obliged to do. So we look forward to our next session with you, and we look forward to you all joining us again in the future.
Thank you very much. Actually, this is the last session.
This is our last session with you. Okay.
Right. And so it's being recorded. I'll be posting probably in a couple of weeks the link to the recording, copy of the PowerPoint slides, and the questions and answers. So I know there's a lot of questions I didn't get to, and I will answer them as part of that posting on my website. And finally, I want to say thanks for people's nice comments, and I appreciate what you all do. You work very hard. I hope this webinar makes your money work a little bit harder for you. So thanks again and goodbye.
Thank you all. Thank you, Tom, and thanks everyone. Have a great night.